Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to yet another Meet the Author session with author Vinod Raman. This session is hosted by the Himalayan Book Club, a Himalayan writing retreat initiative. The Himalayan Book Club was born purely out of our love for the written word. We aim to bridge the gap between the authors and the readers. To become a member, you can visit our website. The link will also be shared towards the end of the session for all of you once again. I'm Nandita, the Digital and Outreach Coordinator at the Himalayan Writing Retreat, and I'm really excited to be hosting this session with Vinod Raman Nair. Mr. Vinod Raman Nair is a filmmaker, researcher, writer, and a producer who just released his first installment of his trilogy book, 3 and the Emerald Stone of Irene. With this book, he tries to approach history with a different perspective and aims to create a more palatable way to digest it. In the first installment of this fictional novel trilogy, author Vinod Raman Nair roots the plot into history by weaving a storyline around the 9th century. The story revolves around the 3 protagonists who step onto the mission of discovering and protecting the Emerald Stone. What follows is a nerve-wracking adventure involving high-octave action, thrills, brain-spinning puzzles, and riddles, shocking discoveries, unraveling the mystics of the 9th century golden age of the Islamic Empire. Vinod's love for the bygone eras and events have led him on travels to 16 countries to study vantage points that potentially created a ripple effect all across the planet. Being a filmmaker, he has worked with legendary talents across the world and is one of the first Indians to have shot across the war-torn Gaza Strip for a German film, which entered the 2004 Berlin Film Festival. We'll be starting the session chatting with Vinod on writing and publishing. If you have any questions for him, you can share with us in the chat box, or we can take them up once the session is over. We'll take it towards the end of the session. Without much ado, let's talk to Vinod. Hello, Vinod. Welcome to this session. It's a pleasure having you with here today.
Same here, same here. Good evening.
Good evening. So can you tell us a bit about your debut novel? What made you choose a historical novel to make a debut with?
Okay. Now, the book is basically, as you rightly said, it deals with the 9th century Islamic Caliphate.
Right.
But why I chose the 9th century was especially because 9th century is known as the golden age of Islamic Empire. Now, most importantly, what the book actually does is, see, there have been a lot of discussions on history,
Right.
and theoretical thesis written on history, great personalities, timelines. See, what I wanted to do here was to upturn the whole approach to history. That was basically to what I'm trying to argue here is let's try to view history devoid of any timelines or personalities.
Right.
What happens is we are living in a very different kind of time right now, where the moment we try to discuss about any personality, what happens if a war ensues. So, what I thought was, let us at least try and dissect history in that way. Now, when it comes to the 9th century Islamic Caliphate, what I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to present all historical events during the 9th century as it is. I'm trying to put it across in a very entertaining fashion, whereby my story is about 3 technocrats living in different parts of the world, coming together to save the world from a supervillain. Now, supervillain is also basically somebody called as it's an organization called as the Order of the 9 Angels. Now, this is basically a neo-satanic institution. They do a lot of occult practices, and that is why they are seeking this Emerald Stone. Now, what is basically this Emerald Stone? Now, this Emerald Stone, the legend says that the Emerald Stone was decked on the crown of the Caesar. And this particular occult stone had a certain power, which they called as the light of fortune,
right,
which helped the Caesarians to rule the world for centuries.
Wow.
But during the decline of the Caesars, decline of the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire was ruled by Empress Irene. And young Harun al-Rashid, who was son to the second Abbasid Khalifa al-Mahdi, he led an expedition to quell the rebellion of the Romans, because Islam was at the surge at that time. And this 15-year-old boy, he defeats General Nicetas on the plains of Sevan.
Mm.
and takes Empress Irene as a captive. So to bail herself out, what she does is she gifts him this particular emerald stone.
Right.
And the Islamic history says, the history of the Islamic Caliphate says, when Harun brought this stone back to Baghdad, he got the title of Al Rashid. That is how he came to be known as Harun al Rashid. And this stone is said to have brought fortune to the Islamic Empire, which ruled over that particular a large part of this world for until the 13th century.
Right.
And what was unique about this particular, why it is called as the golden era, is because unlike what is popularly known, the Islamists are normally looked upon as very brutal, savage people.
Yeah.
Who are always invading people and their expansionist ideas. But unlike that, the 9th century was basically known as the translation period, where Harun built a completely unique institution in the center of Baghdad, which was called as Baitul Hikmah, and which literally translates into the house of wisdom, where scientists, literary laureates, and people from all across the world were invited, brought into this institution, and there was a whole long translation period which started. Even
Right.
in Indian mythology, Indian scriptures were even translated into Arabic and Latin. There are a lot of exchanges which had happened. So this book basically explores that particular translation period, because as I said, I didn't want to talk about personalities when it comes to
Right.
history. What I'm trying to explore is civilization.
Right.
An Islamic civilization which was not barbarous as we actually think about. See, why we see them as barbarous is because they hail from the deserts, and deserts are very cruel. So their lifestyle is very cruel, and inherently they were very scientifically tempered people. There were a lot of glorious discoveries and inventions which were made during this period.
Right.
There was, even the Arabian Nights was written during this period. Scairzade's Arabian Nights, 1001 stories were written during this time. There are some unique things which I'm trying to explore in my book, whereby I'm also talking about algebra. Algebra was basically originally al-jabr, which was basically the contribution of the Arabs to the world. The first of its kind of clock which was built in the world was done by Clem Silani, who was again an Arab, which is still there in Morocco. So basically what I'm trying to do is explore this history in the middle of my three protagonists and this supervillain. And my three protagonists are going to travel through this history. So as my heroes unveil or dig into this history, the audiences also dig into history. So what is happening is they are understanding history through adventure, through high voltage action, funny sequences. As if a very entertaining cruise into the history of the 9th century. That's what my book actually does.
Right.
And coming to the question why I chose this book, actually it was very instinctive here. To be very honestly, the idea of the book, had not germinated as a book. Actually, when the idea germinated, as you know, I was always into the movie magic business.
Yeah.
So certainly movies were very luring. I wanted to put down a screenplay on this. Now, this idea came to me when I was working on a documentary on Warsaw, the Warsaw Pact, when I was in Turkey. And I was doing some research on the Ottomans, actually, for that particular document. And that's where I stumbled upon a book which was called as the Jabrian Corpus. And this particular book, Hussein Jabr, who he has written, right? He was one of the greatest geniuses to be known in the 9th century Islamic history. And this Jabrian corpus, it had a lot of excerpts of the discoveries made, the inventions made, the scientific era that Islamists were during that period. That little enticed me. because I had never heard about this dimension of that particular caliphate. So, I was little slowly digging into these things and then collecting information. And what happened was in the past few years, um, the state of my own country, has been, I'm seeing a lot of confusion around, whereby I don't blame everything on everybody. See, what happens is, unfortunately, our grooming up is where we are not pushed into any kind of research. We are groomed up as mark earning machines, who get into some kind of building onto some career. Now
Mhm.
what happens is, and that is why I find the society today very vulnerable. For that matter, even my father I have seen, very vulnerable, because
Mhm.
there has not been very robust research behind in their journeys. What has happened is, anybody can misguide them, anybody can concoct any history, and through a simple WhatsApp message,
Yeah.
and the people's reaction are very, very robotic. They feel that they consume it as it is real history. So, I somewhere felt it is important to articulate that, well, it's not so bad out there. Because there are some very beautiful things. Let us try and see it this way.
Yeah.
Let's throw off all the hatred, and let's try to see it this way. And even to my peers who are Muslims, I wanted to tell them that, look at what a scientific fraternity it was. You need to think backwards. That was
Mhm.
basically the idea. And my friend actually helped me a lot in this. My
Mhm.
friend Kashyap, who actually told me when I was in a dilemma that, whether to do a screenplay of it, because it was going to be a very huge high cost project. And I was in a dilemma. That's where he helped me out. He told me that, well, see, this project has to be written as a book first. A film could only be an extension.
Okay.
And when I came back and thought about it, I also realized that, yes, what he was trying to tell me is correct. What happens when you make a film out of this directly,
Mhm.
see what happens, there are a lot of small details which get lost in transit. Likewise, say, if I give an example of a Harry Potter, see what is written, and when the film is eventually made, there are a lot of things which have slipped off. So when I'm talking about an era, when I'm talking about architecture, when I'm talking about cities, when I am talking about historical events, there are some things which get lost in transit. So that's why I thought that, yes, let me pull myself back and write a book first. And that's how I authored this book.
That's very interesting to know. Historical novels usually need a lot of research. So, how
Yeah.
did you go about the whole process, and how long was the book in making before it released?
Oh my. Yeah. Well, it took me around 2.5 years.
Wow.
Took me
Okay.
2.5 years from the time when I got hold of the Jabarian corpus. See, it was a huge struggle. See,
Mhm.
not the struggle was not in writing, but to collect the right kind of resources.
Yeah.
See, what happens when you are trying to do something like this? I am very particular about it. That, I don't fudge
Mm.
with historical details. I'm very
Yeah.
particular about, because I have no right over it.
True.
Now, what happened when I got hold of this book? It was very important more for me that I collect multiple resources and try to connect the dots. Now, the issue with me was, when I got this in Turkey, this book was originally in Arabic, and
Mhm.
I had no clue of. I didn't get anybody to translate this in Arabic. The next translation which I got was in Latin.
Okay.
So, I got this translated by two French journalists in Paris. Actually, they have
Mhm.
been friends with me, and we have worked with the project before. So, when I requested them, they were very excited to do it, and they did this translation for me, and that's how the journey of research started. Then there was some material which was collected from Morocco. Al Wasit was a book. Then Risala is a book which was written by Ahmad ibn Fadlain, out of which some details I've already used in the book. Now,
Mhm.
all these were Arabic works, and these had to be translated.
Mm.
You understand? So then those were days of great patience. Trying to understand what these places were. I only review one thing that because Baghdad was almost under ISIS, there was a lot of threat over there.
Yeah.
I couldn't travel to Baghdad and visit Baitul Hikmah. I only could procure some photographs by a Muslim friend who lives in Baghdad actually, and it is in shambles now, right now actually, and
Yeah.
it's being rebuilt because even the Americans did a lot of cost, a lot of destruction to this institution, to this building actually, historic 9th century building,
Yeah.
but it's being reworked, recreated, and then once all the research was on table, see as one portion of the research came in, I started lining up, I started creating a linearity
Mm-hmm.
to the sequence of events. And then when the next works came, I started connecting the dots. Now see, that's exactly how I have actually measured my story also.
Mm-hmm.
So because there is a historical event on how I am connecting it with the Risala, which is written by Ahmad ibn Fadlin, who was basically a poet in his court. Now there are some small excerpts of this particular stone in his book, and how I have connected those things. Then Al Wasit was a book which was basically on the great scientific inventions during that time. And yeah, see, even when we try to dissect the Arabian Nights, this was one wonderful discovery which I made, because I had a special love for Arabian Nights, just because Arabian Nights was the Harry Potter of my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So I had a certain soft corner for Arabian Nights. And what I discovered was Jafar, who plays the Wazir, the evil Wazir, in the Arabian Nights, was actually in real life the most beloved person of Harun al-Rashid. And he was a Burma kid,
Mm-hmm.
and he was one of the most influential persons in the Islamic Empire during that time, because it was Burma kids who brought this power to the caliphs all the time. They have been the longest serving warrior tribe for the Islamic Empire. And all these, there were wonderful things. There was one very wonderful research which I got hold of, and then I connected it to some of my resources in India, and even close on to Pune, where I reside in Bombay. Pune was very close by to me. Now it would be very exciting for readers to understand that there is something called as a Hussaini Brahmin.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody when I asked about it to people, nobody knew about it, and they were stunned and shocked. How can Hussaini be a Brahmin? Now see that these are things which organically I'm trying to tell through my book, that see, the world was already a global village. There were Indian warriors who were roaming all across the world as mercenary tribes, wanting to fight for somebody for a bounty.
Right.
You understand? And this Mohayal tribe were basically and the leader of this tribe was Rahab Dutt. It's a true story actually. Rahab Dutt and his people were at that time around Baghdad, and they were fighting as mercenaries. But he got close to Imam Hussein at that time, and he has fought the Battle of Karbala on the side of Imam Hussein, and he died there. So, there is a whole tribe of around 600 odd people who still live in Arabia, like Bedouins, and they practice Hinduism. And at the same time, they go to the mazar of Imam Hussein. So, the whole history of that time is so very interesting. Harun's personal doctor was Manek, who was a Hindu.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many Indian connections to it,
Yeah.
which lured me more and more into it, and then came the biggest challenge of weaving it into a story,
Mm-hmm.
because see, I had my own experiences regarding it. That's because there are some very good academicians and very good writers, brilliant
Right.
writers whom I never miss actually. in modern times, if I talk, I talk about a Manu Pillai. I read every work of Sashi Tharoor. But what happens is, I somewhere felt I am enjoying that book. But what happens is, my kid is not reading it.
Yeah.
You understand? What happens is, everybody talks about Sashi Tharoor, but when I ask them, what have you read of him? And they don't know. So I thought that, anything that has to be told by me has to be readable even to a 13-year-old boy.
Mm.
And that is where I started contemplating as to what is that direction I should be working on, and that's
Mm.
where I chose the entertaining way of saying it.
Mm. So, you've worked on many historical movies before this, as we just spoke. So, how different was this experience of book writing compared to writing a script, a historical script?
Oh, any it's very very different, to be very
Mhm.
honest. Well, let me correct you. I've not worked on historical films. I've worked on historical documentaries.
Documentaries, right? Sorry, yeah.
See, sadly, it's a bad picture when we talk about historicals in India. To be very honest, personally, I'm very disappointed.
Mhm.
We don't do too much research,
Yeah.
and maybe, see, I give them the benefit of doubt. Maybe that's because too much economics is involved. But what takes away from putting the right fact in the right context? That's very important. Largely, I've never seen a great historical film ever made in the past 20 years. uh, but see, when it comes to I will talk about documentaries and writing a book. See, in documentaries, what happens is, see, you think about a resolution. Either resolution is discovered
Mm.
while making a documentary, while you are writing a documentary,
Right.
or you discover it when you are actually shooting it.
Mm.
There are two ways of doing it. Now, what happens is, you have to go through the whole bit of research when you are
Mm.
getting into the research is the same. But,
Mm.
well, there are documentaries which run out of funds. See, what
Mm.
happens, there is a certain particular fund assigned to a particular documentary. So what happens, you might not be able to entirely finish off that particular event.
Right.
You could choose a part of it. You could choose a part of it, and you will try to deal with it. Now, what
Mm.
happens is, many a times what happens is, documentaries are supported by interviews.
Mm.
A lot of people who put their views in. Now, there could be a prejudiced view also which could come in.
Right.
But that's a nuance of making a documentary, where you have two three point of views which come to the fore.
Mm.
At the same time, documentary is basically where um, um, uh, a documentary maker doesn't have a point of view. The
Mm.
whole idea of a documentary is basically to document an event.
Mm.
Their his or her point of view is not important. He's just documenting that particular thing in a
Mm.
particular way and presenting it in an interesting way. Now, when it comes to the book, what happens is, you can choose the way how you want to say the story.
Right.
In documentary, that doesn't work actually.
Mm.
In book, you can choose a storytelling method. You can you can either do a fiction, a non-fiction. You can choose any direction you want to go into. Now, what happens is, apart from having your research done, what happens in a book is basically, in a documentary or a film, you have a team of say 50 people who help you execute a particular thing.
Mm.
But when you're writing a book, you are on your own self. You are basically the cinematographer, you are basically the writer, you are the editor, you are the costume designer, you are the production designer, you are literally everything. So it's a multi-layered responsibility, and you have to be, and that is where the research has to be to the letter T.
Right.
Because when we are doing a periodic drama, you can depend on a when you are making a movie. What happens is you can depend on a very intelligent costume designer
Mm.
to bring you the best. But here you have to invest time, even for the costumes.
Mm.
Because if you are describing a costume, if you are describing a certain architecture, you need research for that. So that is basically the basic difference which I felt
Mm.
writing a book, and you can get into more details. That's what I felt.
Okay. So, according to you, what was the biggest challenge that you felt while you were working on this novel?
Oh, challenge. Well, challenge was yes. The challenge was basically to make the story readable, believable to even a 13-year-old boy, 13-year-old kid. That was the most challenging part.
Mm-hmm.
See, and what happens is, see, as time passes, what happens is you also start feeling sometimes that am I going to hit a cliche? People always try to run away from cliches.
Yeah.
See, because I was discussing this in one of the other interviews, and I told them, when they asked me about three, I told them, see, the idea was very simple. I took it from Manmohan Desai, Amar
Mm.
Akbar Anthony.
Mm.
For me, Amar Akbar Anthony was the 1970s a comedy classic.
Right.
For me, the idea came that is the kind of narrative which I wanted to keep
Mm.
for my story, so that even a 13-year-old boy a kid, I should say, can read it and enjoy it. The
Right.
idea was, see, I tried this. I tried this with my son.
Mm.
He's basically 12-year-old, but he's a voracious reader.
Mm.
I braved my chances with him, and he came back to me and he told me, see, there were some research parts, some historical parts where he could not connect.
Mm.
He jumped that part,
Right.
but he read the puzzles, he read the riddles in the book. He read the thrilling part, he read the adventure. And he came back and he was sharing with me all those things. And
Mm.
he also told me that there were some things which registered in his mind. See, that was more important for me. See,
Mm.
what he told me was, Dad, I am studying Abbasids in my school now.
Mm.
So what happened is that portion he could relate, he could connect
Mm.
Abbasids. But he's not being taught about Harun al-Rashid, so he could understand that Harun al-Rashid is from the Abbasids.
Right.
So that connection is what I wanted to give those kid readers who are going to read it. At the same time, they also enjoy the whole
Mm.
voyage. Because I have also tried to, if you have read my book, I have also tried to treat it like a travelogue.
Right.
See, there are a lot of locations, lot of destinations which I have tried to historically connect and say that this is how this particular place is.
Right.
So what happens is that kid or the person who is reading it will also get to
Mm.
know that place.
Right. Uh, I would like to invite Krishna. Krishna, I see your hand raised here. Yeah, so Vinod, Krishna has been a participant in a lot of our workshops. He's very active in the book club and other activities that we do at the retreat. He is here and he would like to ask you something, I believe. Krishna, he's Vinod, has recently released his, I think you joined us a little late. He's recently released his book through Notionpress, which is a historical fiction. Yeah, so over to you, Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinod. Congratulations on your book release.
Thank you. Hello, Krishna.
Yeah. I have two questions. One is this historical fiction when you start writing. So how do you go about the process of from the chapter flow or something, right? Because you need to go and research also.
Yeah.
Once you start writing, probably you will stumble upon certain areas where there might be some gaps in your research, or probably you may need to go back and reference and things like that. So how do you structure your the chapter flow, things like that, and how do you fill in with your research, complement with your research? So
I'll tell you out of my experience. See, what happens is see, there are, that is why I said it's a very laborious journey. See, what happens is you don't break. See, breaking into chapters is basically the 10th or the 11th stage. You never break into chapters right at the first go.
Yeah.
You write the story. When you write the story and when you start working on it, what happens is the story itself will demand a certain kind of research.
Yeah.
You have to be very clear what am I trying to say, and how do I want to say. The moment you resolve this within yourself, what happens is you get into the act of ideating and writing. When you are writing, there will be situations, there will be positions where the book itself will ask you for more research. That's where you will have to stop. You'll have to stop and then again get into research.
Okay.
And there might be a situation where you might come across something more interesting than what you have already written. You'll have to pick that up and throw it away and then construct something new. So it's a laborious process. And then you break into chapters, so that why do we actually break it into chapters? We break it into chapters to make reading more interesting.
Yeah.
To make it more interesting. And then when you break it into chapters, then you try to cite that the end of the chapter we are living a certain kind of an intrigue. We are living a certain kind of excitement where the reader needs to jump into the next chapter. All these are very later on things. What I feel is you have your basic research first, extensive research, which gives you conviction to get into writing. Without that conviction, you cannot get in. You have to be very comfortable. You have to be in that space. When you close your eyes, I need to see Baitul Hikmah. I needed to see Harun's world. I needed to see Empress Irene. I needed to see that Emerald Stone. I needed to see that golden arrow. When I'm in that world and I feel that, yes, and that is where I start writing. But again, there were a lot of where I brought in, the Atlantis flood theory. That was one point where I had to revisit the research again.
Okay.
You understand? So back and forth you will have to come when you're writing a book. When you're writing a screenplay, you don't have this luxury.
Yeah. Okay. My second question is just about the writing process itself, because you also had now in the process of answering, you told that it's a laborious process. So how do you go about this? I mean, it's kind of you need to keep yourself motivated and things like that, right? Like it will be long hours of writing and things like that. So how do you structure your day, or how do you go about writing, the planning of writing this book itself?
See, it was not too challenging for me. That's because I have always been into writing. You understand? So maybe because I'm a South Indian, I don't know. There was a certain discipline which was forced into me right from my grooming days. So some of my friends are very surprised when I tell them that I'm a very early riser. So I start writing at 8 in the morning. I have my breakfast at 7. 8 o'clock I start writing. I write till 1 o'clock. I have my food. Then I just do. I might take a small nap, or I might watch some television. Then 3 o'clock, basically, I get back to work. 3 to 7 is what I work then. And then night I only work for 2 hours. That is 10 to 12. That might not be writing. that might be plotting. I do some rough work of plotting. Trying to think. Where I could take my character. How my character should react here. Sometimes I try to choreograph an action sequence.
Okay.
And this is basically my writing schedule. See, but again, it's all too instinctive here. There is no method to this. I'm telling you, there might be days you can't write anything. You have to be very patient. You have to be very patient with yourself. If you push yourself, you will end up doing mistakes. You should not be pushing yourself. I always feel you should not push yourself to writing a book. The book has to call you. the moment you see them, there are movements which they call as the writer's clutter.
Yeah.
Where you hit a block. You feel that oh shit, what have I written? It's all messed up. At that time, what I suggest is shut down the computer and take a break.
Mm.
Take a complete break. Then don't think about the script at all. Then don't think about your work till the work calls you back. For me, it has always happened that way. I have given 5 days break, not even thinking about it, 7 days, 8 days. And then ultimately, when my characters call me back, I go there. It might sound very, storytelling, but that's how it works. That's how you are attached to your work.
There is a other school of thought which says that you need to show up daily, you need to show up certain time, and you need to write whatever it comes to your mind, things like that, right? Like to keep your journey of writing.
That's what I said. There is no fixed method. There is no copybook. See, even cricket has changed. No? Cricket had a copybook. Take your legs forward and play a defensive shot. Now it is 2020. I have never followed methods in my life because I somewhere feel that methods somehow somewhere hamper your instincts. It hampers your flow. See, because always understand there is one fact which nobody can change. That you are the first audience to your work. So if it convinces you, then you will get a lot of people who will be convinced, because there will be people who share your thought process.
Yeah. Thank you, Vinod.
So rather than being a writer, you should think of yourself as a reader.
That's a very insightful thing to say, actually. You are your first audience.
Yeah, you are. See, even in filmmaking, that's how it works. See, the director is the first audience to the film.
Yeah.
It is same here.
Sure.
You know how nervous a writer feels when his book is going to see the end of the tunnel. The whole it's not about convictions. See, it is about receival. How will it be received? You understand? The book is already written. But the thing is, what happens is, how will it be received? Will the idea be communicated in the right way? That is basically the nervousness of the writer. So, it's part of the game, and he is the audience. Certainly, he is the first reader of his book.
Yeah. So Vinod, you've opted for self-publishing in this book. So how was your experience and why did you choose self-publishing?
Oh, see, I would I would have wanted to go to a publisher. That is how I started off. But what happened was, see, it's very, very difficult times that we are living in. See, what happened was, I didn't want to get into any kind of I didn't want to get into a situation where a publisher tells me change this, change that, change this. Times are volatile, change this. See, I didn't want to get into controversies which I had never thought about when I was writing this book. You understand? See, that is why I thought that let me take the risk on myself and let me self-publish it. And what happens is, when you go to a publisher as a first book, they start putting in ideas which I didn't want to do, and I wanted to. When I'm doing my first book, I wanted it to be a very virgin kind of an experience. I wanted to put in. That was basically the only reason why I went to self-publishing mode.
Censorship is actually one of the most common reasons most of the people opt for self-publishing, because traditional publishing does censor a lot of works. It is across genres. It's like even horror, erotica, political. It is across genres. It's not only when you're writing, religious things or historical things only. Yeah.
Censorship should be thrown into the dustbin, according to me.
Yeah.
Because see, it is like somebody is telling you you are not intelligent enough to consume what you want. We will tell you what you should consume. See, this is very ridiculous for me. See, most importantly, I'll tell you, I didn't want my book to be typed as a Muslim book. My book is not a Muslim book.
Yeah, of course.
That was one of the biggest fears which I was going through during that time.
Mm-hmm.
To be branded as a book on Islam. It is not a book on Islam. So that is why I chose the self-publishing way.
Okay. So how was your experience? Like, would you say it was absolutely, perfect, where you just had to make a certain decisions and it was done? Would you recommend self-publishing to authors who are looking at it?
See, my reaction was very mixed, to be very honest.
Mm-hmm.
See, to start with, it was very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Because they also read my manuscript and then only they came back to me saying that, and we had a small discussion also, where I categorically told them that, see, my book is not an Islamic fiction. It's not an Islamic book. I categorically made it very clear to them. I don't see it in that category at all. And I also told them, there were some areas where, they felt that, it might be a little politically volatile. And I justified it to them that, that is not what is meant. These are all factual things recorded through various sources. And that fear went off because they trusted the narrative of the book. And when I was through that, they also took me through that whole publishing journey, which was very interesting, and they were very cooperative. See, what I was not very happy about was the post publishing scenario. The post publishing scenario is where, see, what happens is any writer, as you, when you started the session, you said, when you talked about Himalayan book club. See, what happens is it is a new writer with ideas who needs the biggest support when it comes to after post publishing, so that the work resonates. See, already we are into a stage, into a society where reading is basically going passive.
Yeah.
People don't read. There are very few percentage of people who read. Ultimately what happens is that is one area where I felt that Notion was not up to the mark. So I had to pull in more energy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily for me, I got a good team, and they really understood my situation, and they have pulled it through.
So you would recommend any author who's trying to publish to opt for self-publishing if it meets their requirements?
You want me to suggest some publishing house?
No. I'm not asking you to suggest names. I'm saying, would you recommend an author to consider self-publishing in general as an option instead of opting for traditional? Because if, like you said,
See, what I feel is when you do your first book, you get a measure of how the book market works.
Yeah, true.
See, what happens, howsoever creative you are, you will have to fight it out for your first 5 books.
Right.
Until you create your own niche. So I've prepared myself psychologically for a long war. It's fine. I am very happy the way my book has fared. It came out in the last week of October.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the start of December, and we have made some very interesting sales. We have made.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to get the figures. See, that is another point. With self-publishing organizations, companies, what happens is the international sales, they don't give you the real-time feedback.
Right.
For an international sale, you need to know, you will get to know only 90 days after.
Mm.
So that's how it works. So for the first 5 books, I think any writer has to be patient. That's how it works.
Sure.
Movies, it is faster. One Friday takes you to the next pedestal. But writer, well, because though we claim we don't live in a very academic world these days, readers are less.
So, which writers or directors have inspired you in your works?
Oh, that's a long list. That's a long list, actually.
Okay, maybe just top 3. Let's
See,
make it short.
I'll tell you. See, this question has been asked before also. See, what I tell you is, see, there have been umpteen writers, umpteen filmmakers who have had their moment of brilliance.
Right.
What I feel is any artist will have a moment of brilliance in any one of his or two of his or four of his work, and then there is a certain kind of a consistency. But what I feel is maybe people might brand me as an old timer or an old school, but I still feel that 2 3 books which have endured times, and has left an indelible imprint inside me for 40 years later also. I read them around when I was 13 14 years. One is Leo Tolstoy. I feel he has endured inside me for a long time, even today. I like Dostoevsky also. Monto, I love Monto, the way he expresses his things.
Absolutely.
R.K. Narayan was a gem, I feel. When I read R.K. Narayan, well, I was introduced to the work of Bimal Roy before R.K. Narayan. So, whenever I read R.K. Narayan, I always remember a quote made by Bimal Roy. Bimal Roy had said how difficult it is to be simple. So writing about simple things of life is so very difficult. R.K. Narayan completely pulls me into that particular realm. Swami and his friends. You remember your childhood. Who has written about childhood like this? These are all some wonderful works which I feel inspire me. Now, inspire me necessarily need not be you start writing like them. Inspiration for me is the intent. The way of looking at things. That is what inspires me. See, because ultimately a writer is basically a record keeper of an era. You pick up book from time memorial, and I'm telling you, those books will give you a reflection of that particular era. But sadly, things have changed in today's times. It doesn't happen that way. And when it comes to filmmakers, well, I'm completely, see, Spielberg is one of the great filmmakers who have done. Why I talk about Spielberg is Spielberg has made literally films on every genre. He has made some fantabulous historicals. I loved his last historical, which was Lincoln. If I talk about Dunkirk, was another historical made by Nolan. See, there are very few people who, I don't know if somebody could understand what was the significance of Dunkirk in World War II. What happens is, now the problem is we can't make that kind of a film in India. That's because people don't know what is Dunkirk. There are many people who ask me, Dunkirk kya naam hai? So I had to tell him that it's the name of a place, by. So what happens is see, that is why we make films which are very, and it's called in our language as film C. हमारे historical film भी बड़े film C होते हैं. I always wondered, can we ever make a Lincoln in our country? I've always wondered. So that is how it works. So these are some filmmakers who I am in awe of. Spielberg, Nolan. Again, people say that there was one more filmmaker, Stanley Kubrick. He also had made a historical as his first film, and then got into a space where he made all cult films, but none of his films have succeeded. But he's the most sought out director. He made a film called Spartacus, which was not at all his genre, which was his first film. There have been some filmmakers who have been really crazy and have done brilliant jobs, and they still inspire that to die another day.
So, wow. Our last question for this session is: what is the message you would like the reader to take from your book?
Oh, I'm not a message guy. There are no messages. See, I just want to tell you, I wrote this book with a simple intent. The simple intent was that let us try, at least try, see what history of India cannot be viewed in isolation. See, history is never viewed in isolation. Anything that happens in India will have its after effects in another part of the world, and vice versa. See, the simple thing is, I tried to reason this out with a friend of mine who is a very, very fighting debater. See, I told him, do you know where potatoes came from? India didn't even grow rice. It also came from somewhere. India's staple food was jowar. We didn't have rice, we didn't have tea, we didn't have cauliflower, we didn't have watermelon, we had nothing. All this came from somewhere else. So, history has to be seen in a very macro way. That is basically the whole intent. My intent was that, let's not antagonize any people. There are no villains in history. See, that spot, everybody were invading during that time. There were no countries at that time. We were all tribes. We were all tribes. We need to understand. See, what happens is I am sitting in 21st century and I am trying to articulate something about an era which I never lived, which I don't understand. See, even the moralities were different. Even the ethos were different. But what happened, that is the only intent which I approached it, where I have never, there is no slander in my book. I have not accused anybody. There are no allegations. I'm just trying to say that, see what a wonderful civilization it is. So no messages actually. The only idea was to say that let's not see history in isolation.
It's been really great chatting with you. You've mentioned two of my favorite authors, was Manto and R.K. Narayan, and I am definitely curious to pick this book because one of the major books which I love is Chukrai a lot, and she has written a book on the Karbala war. If you remember, she has written One Drop of Blood, which was exceptionally controversial. I have read that book thrice, and now that you are referring to this backside story which I heard from you now, I'm definitely curious about reading this book as well. I'm surely going to pick up. Thank you so much for your time. It was great interacting with you.
If you read my book, don't miss to give me your views.
Definitely. I'll definitely do that. I'll definitely leave a review, and I'll let you know also what I thought about it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mamta.
Thank you,
Mr.